You thought I was gone, didn't ya? Anyways, I'm finally back after watching everything in the tease. We're almost done, guys and gals. Let's get right into it. There's, as you can imagine, a lot to talk about. Number 157 is Tales from the Hood 2. Man, it's been a while since I've been this disappointed. I saw the first Tales from the Hood years ago with a friend, and I was in high school, and we remember it being a very fun anthology movie. I don't know what the hell happened to this one. The laughably shitty, spooky, scary skeletons intro did not bode well for my confidence. Unfortunately, I don't really want to talk a lot about this movie for certain reasons. Well, let me put it like this. The first Tales from the Hood felt a lot more genuine, and it came from what it felt like to me probably a more actual place, if that makes sense. Whereas this movie felt way more forced with what I was trying to say. Also, it's just incredibly fucking cheap. The second one, just as in the second story in the anthology, is the best one because it's stupid and funny and has that persnickety asshole from season 2 of Twin Peaks. I will briefly comment on the third short film, which is about two guys trying to date rape two rich girls at their mansion. I don't know how this at all correlates to the theme of being from the hood or from being or anything race related either, because it's not in the hood. It's in a fucking upstate gated neighborhood, and the guys who are trying to do the attempted date rape are both black and white. So I don't see what this has to. This is gonna sound really fucking bad out of context. Anyway, it just seems a very odd conclusion. Also, it sucked. 90% of these sucked. Just watch the first one if you can. 3 out of 10, I guess. 158 is Target, an Indonesian horror comedy that I managed to only stand about an hour of. Plot is basically that a group of actors get stuck in what's essentially a Saw premise. If that and really bad comedy sounds interesting, give it a watch. You know what? I think I'm just gonna give any movie that I have to skip for just being this level of boring and bad just a 3 out of 10. I think that's fair. Number 159 is Temple. This was another disappointing watch. It had what seemed like an interesting premise. Basically, there's a guy acting as a tour guide for an old friend of his and her boyfriend through Japan, and she always wants to see some hidden temples or some weird temples, so he tricks a tiny baby Japanese boy into giving them a book that leads to a forbidden temple. Now, this temple happens to be guarded or haunted by a kitsune. Now, see, I was excited because Japanese yokai lore is chock full of weird and interesting monsters, like the one that sucks people's souls out through their butt or something. And while this is one of the most commonly known ones, there's a lot you can do with it. Kitsune, and this literally just means fox, but in the context of the yokai it means fox spirit, are said to be like ancient trickster spirits, kind of like fancy poltergeists, or even like treated as deities. They get stronger and wiser the longer they've been around. It really depends on the specific context. They can shapeshift, possess, conjure fire and lightning, make illusions appear, and who knows what else depending on the depiction. And what do they do in this movie? Yeah. Okay, it's also pretty fucking obvious that this kid is supposed to be, I guess this is a spoiler, but a ghost, from the way he acts later on in the movie to how he appears out of nowhere, and then at the end they present it like it's an earth-shaking twist. And I remember being really confused because I was like, oh, did I miss something? I thought they already said this, but no, it was just obvious and they didn't think it was obvious. This movie had some interesting shots towards the end, but the whole thing is pretty boring and it's just wasted potential. 4 out of 10. Skip it. Number 160 is The Third Eye. Okay, quick warning, I'm going to be on this for a while because I cannot properly encapsulate the absurdity of this without spending this much time on it. This was a very difficult movie to watch for a few reasons. First, it's incredibly fucking loud. Second, the plot was impossible for me to follow. Maybe I'm just dumb, but it's just one scene after another without much of any connection. And then when the director thought things were getting boring, he just started adding more and more random shit to happen and explain things hastily out of his ass when it didn't immediately make sense. It was just dump after dump. Like, exposition dump. Oh, yeah, the plot, I guess. Girl's little sister can see ghosts. Big sister doesn't believe. They bring her to goth Indonesian medium lady who basically says, yeah, like her third eye's been open to some shit since forever so she can see shit. Then the big sis says, fine, open mine, and then if I don't see shit, I'm taking this girl to a therapist, and you're a charlatan. So she gets her eye forced open, doesn't immediately see shit, so she takes her to a hospital, and then she starts seeing shit, and random ghosts run after her for what feels like an hour. And at this point, it kind of just feels like they throw monster or ghost after you, hoping that one of them will scare you. By you, I mean the viewer. You, or be interesting. But it all happens so fucking fast that nothing sticks. I'm not even like, I don't even remember what was happening. I was so confused. Because all of a sudden, they start investigating one of the ghosts that they rapid fire for some reason. And it's confusing because these ghosts were presented, like I said, in the same machine gun blast that all these other ghosts were. So I didn't immediately get why this was the plot all of a sudden. But the reason is because they need a plot. Gotham Medium throws out more bullshit lore. Then they try to figure out why the ghost of a family is haunting them. It turns out that they were slain in that house. A robber had come in the middle of the night and fucking chopped off the dad's leg with one swing of his mighty machete and stuffed them all in a closet until they suffocated, I guess. Oh, by the way, they're seeing these events through channeling or some shit. I don't know. They're just watching it, I guess. From here, I thought, oh no, this movie's gonna be an investigation to figure out who the robber is, and then that's gonna be like the rest of the movie. But no, luckily the robber turns towards the camera at the last second and takes off his mask before he leaves and just stares and gives you a good chance to identify him. So fuck that shit, I guess. Turns out it's the gardener, and then one of the ghosts possesses one of them and chases him and starts an attempt to murderize him. And then we get a flashback for the gardener. It turns out that the ghost dad was a douchebag who docked his pay that he needed for his dying wife because the dad fucked up with the fertilizer and blamed him for it. So the gardener was going to go rob him to pay for the wife. Now why he thought it'd be a good idea to chop off the dad's leg and kill the family, I don't know. I don't care. Fast forward to the next detail I can barely parse out. Now they have to rip off Insidious like every 8th movie on this list has, and go into the astral plane to bring the little sister back and avoid spooky shit along the way. The problem here is that it's not an ethereal plane of horror and mashed up time, it's just a shitty garage, a really shitty parking garage or storage facility. Oh, by the way, there's a boyfriend character this whole time for the big sister, and apparently you can't go into the astral plane without a dead guy as a guide. But according to the Gotham Medium, oh, don't worry, by the way, that boyfriend, he was dead the whole time, I guess. And apparently the big sister's third eye was already open from the beginning of whatever. And apparently talking to people manifests as dreams, so the boyfriend doesn't have to say bye to his dad because he's technically already done it. Again, this is all just last minute info dump by Gotham Medium lady. And then they get her back, and the boyfriend, they get the daughter back. It's the daughter? The sister. Then they get the sister back, and then the boyfriend fucks off to the afterlife, I guess. This movie just throws random bullshit at you scene after scene in a giant shotgun approach, hoping that it will eventually entertain you, but instead it left me completely and utterly confused. It's also a situation where the writer was inspired by like 5 things he really likes and had 5 or 8 somewhat finished or half-finished ideas, and instead of picking 1 or 2 to solidify, he just threw them all into one script. This movie is a complete fucking mess, and the script must be a nightmare. The movie was like a 4.4 out of 10. Again, increasingly precise scoring, but wait, that's what you gotta do in a list like this. So yeah, watch it if you want to be baffled. Now let's talk about the sequel. 161 is The Third Eye 2. I do not know why I finished this movie. The audio problems in this movie felt worse than the first somehow. It was legitimately painful to watch. I don't mean to sound like Doug Walker or Chris Bores, but this movie was giving me splitting headaches from how fucking awfully it was mixed. The background music is either way too loud or it just never shuts the fuck up. I can't quite show exactly how bad that louder portion is without showing you the whole movie. But you can at least see how loud it is. To make sure I wasn't going crazy, I even had Logan or Minty, or however the fuck you know him by now, come in and watch the rest of this shit show with me. Oh, and by the way, just to show that I'm not a brainlet, yes, constant ambience can work. David Lynch does that shit all the time, but there's a clear difference between Mulholland Drive and The Third Eye 2. Oh yeah, plot. The little sister from the first movie that they saved, she gets killed by a ghost that the last movie ended with as a teaser. And then the big sister gets sad and decides to work at an orphanage her parents left behind in order to cope with it. Weird shit happening at this orphanage too, because it's a movie. There's another girl here who's got a third eye, and then they bond or some bullshit. They fuck up and accidentally let out a malevolent ghost, and then the movie becomes a theme park. A lot of the same criticisms as the first movie. I will say they did improve on the cohesiveness on the plot a bit. It's like 4 random ideas instead of 8, but I still had a hard time following it. Now, it's possible that in writing it's perfectly sensible, but my brain isn't quite able to process much of anything given the ear-splitting audio problems. I don't know whether to rate this higher or lower. The plot was followable, but I didn't want to follow it because it fucked with my head. I'm gonna say for the audio reasons alone, it's worse, because audio is so important in a movie. Like sound design and score, like that is like the backbone of a movie watching experience. 4 out of 10, because you need to fix your fucking audio, man. 162 on the list is The Babysitter. Well, I was convinced that this was going to be shit because Bella Thorne was attached to this, and I'm glad to say that I am pleasantly surprised. This movie was, while obnoxious and lame at times, was a very, very fun, gory slasher movie. Like, from 0 to 100. Premise is about as basic as you can get. A nerdy, awkward kid, Cole, happens to have a hot babysitter named B that he's attracted to, and then he finds that there's more to her than meets the eye, much like GoBots. His female friend is convinced that the babysitter has friends or orgies or some shit whenever Cole goes to bed. So whenever B gives him a shot of liquor, which is already a red flag, for him to go to sleep, he pretends to drink it and then wakes up to sneak on them and see what's going on. Cole clearly hears voices and expects to see some sort of weird orgy or whatever the hell high schoolers do. And sure enough, it's a bunch of obnoxious teenagers and one awkward teenager playing Spin the Bottle. After a creepily gratuitous kiss scene... mild spoilers from here. Honestly, I recommend just jumping in to the movie if you want a ridiculously gory, fun slasher. But if you don't mind, here we go. B stabs 2 knives directly into the nerdy teenager's head and starts draining his blood. Turns out the teenagers are part of a satanic cult, and they need 2 things. The blood of the innocent, which is the teenager, and the blood of the pure, which is Cole. They catch him sneaking on them, and the first thing he asks is...
Why is he shirtless?
From here, the movie is an escape and almost Home Alone style slasher. It's both obnoxious but funny. Most of the obnoxious characters end up getting hurt in some way, so it's a nice bit of Schadenfreude. However it's said. Not much more to say. Practical effects gore, nice. Well executed humor, good. Satisfying ending and overall fun time, great. It's kind of like a different flavor of Tucker and Dale versus Evil, which I will get to later on. I think the actors did a pretty great job. It's one of those rare situations where I don't think the actors themselves are probably good outside of these very specific roles. I do not like Bella Thorne or this TikTok star, I'm pretty sure whatever the fuck he is. But this is a perfect role for these 2 characters. So basically, perfect casting. I'm going to give this a 7.5 out of 10. It's not a life-changing film, but it's pretty great for what it is. If it toned down some of the obnoxious choices, I think I'd rate this higher. But yeah, watch it, it's fun. Number 163 is The Babysitter 2: Killer Queen. It's a bit unfortunate that the poster or thumbnail they use on Netflix is a spoiler, but it's not a big deal, honestly. This movie directly follows the first one, and of course this is going to be all spoilers for the first movie, so keep that in mind as I review this. Cole is now a teenager. The world is convinced that he is insane, since the bodies of the satanic babysitters actually went missing before the cops arrived. He's still weird and trying to cope with what happened. Being totally traumatized and having no one, not even his parents, believe in him, he doesn't feel too good. The girl next door from the first movie now has a different man, actual boyfriend that's not him, but she feels bad for the impending asylum visit that Cole's headed towards, so she invites him to come to a cabin on the lake with her friends, and can you guess what's going to happen from here? Again, spoilers. The exact same thing happens again, except the girl next door was also a Satanist the whole time too. That does bring up some plot hole problem with the first movie, with like why was she helping him if she was also a Satanist, but whatever. I don't care with this kind of movie, I really don't. The teens from before, except B for now, also get resurrected for a final chance at killing Cole and completing the ritual, although this time he's not alone. The obnoxiously standoff girl from before happens to walk in on the ritual and is now caught in the crossfire, and now they both have to either escape or kill the cult together. Probably the latter if you've seen the first movie, if you know what I'm talking about. There's not much to say about this one either. It's almost the exact same as the first movie with a few little twists, but I mean, if it ain't broke. Honestly, exact same rating as the first movie, 7.5 out of 10. Again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Number 164 is The Bar. Well, I was first disappointed because I had gotten this movie confused with a different foreign movie that involved aliens invading and their only weakness being alcohol. So to combat the aliens, every character had to get really drunk the entire time. But no, that was Grabbers, not The Bar. Just the Grabbers happens to be about a bar, and this is just also about a bar. This was a Spanish movie about a group of different people who happen to be stuck inside of a bar due to the fact that as soon as someone leaves, they take a bullet to the brain. From here, it's an hour or so of paranoia, mystery, and people falling apart. I do like the limited set, and I also think that is good for horror movies, really amp up that claustrophobic factor. But one issue that I did have with this film is that it starts off a bit boring. I don't really care about any of these characters for the first 30 or so minutes. The other happens to be that the characters themselves, even after you get invested slightly, aren't very interesting. Well, except for the homeless guy, but that's obvious. No one was especially likable. I didn't particularly hate anybody, though. The writing was okay. It was alright. But most of this movie was just okay. It didn't get super interesting, or interesting really at all, until the end. I'm not a huge fan of these kinds of movies, to be honest, so I feel like other people would maybe like it more. 5.5 out of 10. Again, really take this with a grain of salt. Number 165 is The Binding. This list is making me retroactively appreciate movies I hated before, because at the very least I can tell when a serious attempt is being made, and I'll explain this a bit more when I get into the next movie. But yeah, The Binding was sadly disappointing, as it seems to be part of the theme so far. About an Italian horror movie about a son going to visit his natural healer mother with his fiancée and her daughter. They make a whole point about binding referring to psychic control, and it doesn't really feel like it has much to do with the rest of the movie, except for maybe the very end. When he gets to his mom's, the little girl starts acting very weird, and she's apparently bound. So now they gotta unbound her, or she's dead. To put it plainly, the movie is very beautiful. The shots and set pieces do look really nice, but it's a beautiful piece of white bread. There's nothing of substance here. The scares are practically non-existent. The plot is whatever as well. There's a twist where it turns out the husband was shitty or something, and now it's payback time. The characters aren't particularly likable, and they're pretty dumb too. This movie was just really boring, and again, that's one of the worst things a movie can be. 3.5 out of 10, a pretty waste of time. Number 166 is The Black Coat's Daughter. Really quick, I'm going to say this review is going to be kind of weird. So this is the second movie on this list directed by Osgood Perkins, the first of which was I Am Pretty in That House or something. I think this is a big step up from that movie, but I'm going to have to be a little bit more honest regarding that as well. I do think I was a bit unfair towards Pretty House Simulator. I think I'll bump it to a 5 out of 10 from the 3.5 personally, because that's a funny thing about doing a list like this. You would think that by amassing this much some movie stuff in my head, that my criterion for a good movie would get narrower and narrower, and a bad movie gets wider. But it's almost the opposite. I'm now able to further appreciate actual attempts at filmmaking and art, unlike the shameless bottom-of-the-barrel ripoffs or movies that can hardly even function as background noise. Pretty Woman, while lacking much passive style, was fine. It was clearly going for a specific feeling, and I think it did achieve it. I just didn't like it that much. Anyways, this movie. I think this functions much better as a horror movie than his other movie, if you know what you're getting into. Me and Logan, Minty or whatever the fuck you know him as, both watched this movie a long ass time ago, and we kind of despised it because we had gotten the wrong idea. Kind of like It Comes at Night, really. It's like that same situation. But this isn't the movie's fault. It's Reddit's fault, as everything usually is. Everyone kept recommending this movie to us as like some ass-blasting, grab you by the throat and rip out your eyes, frightening horror. But it's not that. Not at all. No. So obviously, we felt like we got grifted. But I decided to give it another shot, knowing what was coming, and I actually quite enjoyed it. This is an artsy, slow burn involving intertwining stories that take place at different times, but essentially the same setting. And then there's also a slightly different take on a familiar story, but that much is a spoiler. Like Housewoman, it's super atmospheric and moody, the score is very good, and it has really haunting imagery of an otherwise boring setting. And there's a feeling of everything being slightly off, or that everything is about to snap or go off, but you can't quite see where the bomb is or what the bomb even is. And that's good. That's good for a slow burn.
Is something funny?
Funny? No. Why?
You smiled a little.
I did?
Yes, you did.
Oh. No.
Basically, the tension is nice. The plot involves two girls at a Catholic girls' school, or whatever those are called. One's a normal, outgoing girl named Rose, and the other, the main character, Kat, played by Kiernan Shipka, which you may recognize from that boring Sabrina Netflix show, plays a quiet, mousy, and awkward girl. The two of them were supposed to be picked up by their parents for the vacation, but they're running quite late, so it's just them, the nuns, and the father/headmaster. The nuns know Kat is a bit fucking weird, so they ask Rose to look after her, but then Rose is like, okay, I gotta go deal with some shit, so just chill out here. And then Kat gets a mysterious phone call that changes the course of everything. Oh, and then there's the other story. A woman named Joan, played by Emma Roberts, who's pretty awesome, I always like her when I see her in a movie, escaped from a mental institution and is trying to get to some specific town for whatever purpose. And a kind older man and his wife let her hitchhike to to get her wherever she needs to go. Both of these plots slowly come together in a neat way, and they complete each other in processes that I don't really want to spoil. I like the vibe of this movie a lot. Nothing super crazy happens. This isn't The Conjuring, which I will get into later. Nothing blows up. It's very quiet, except for a portion where they could have maybe remixed a certain knife sound effect that sounds really, really weird and off when you hear it in rapid succession. Anyways, nothing too much I can say. I feel like this movie might be boring to a good few people. If you like movies like The Witch, The Witch, or Killing of a Sacred Deer, you know, borderline art house movies, or just super atmospheric movies, then I'd recommend it. It's also an hour and a half, like less than that actually, so it's not long. Watch it maybe in cold weather for better viewing. But yeah, I'm not gonna do what Reddit does and recommend this to absolutely everybody. That's a terrible idea. I think a 7 out of 10 is probably fair. Number 167 is The Blair Witch Project.
And this is a very important book because it has the article about what happened at Coffin Rock.
That's pretty old.
Yeah, it's totally old. And this is my field notebook.
Hey, look at this! One of the only found footage movies that you'll ever need to see. This movie got added by the time I pretty much finished watching the teas. Quite a few did actually, but luckily I've seen all of them, including this, and I'm really happy to see this movie on Netflix. And to clarify, this is not the god-awful Blair Witch that came out in 2016. This movie came out in 1999, would you believe that? It's one of those quintessential found footage movies that really propelled the genre. There's not much for me to say for this review. It's about 3 student filmmakers who are trying to document the urban legend of the Blair Witch, of course.
1940, some of the young kids started to disappear, and nobody knew anything about why they were disappearing.
The creepiest, creepiest story about her that I ever heard was that 2 men were out hunting, and they were camped near the cabin or something that she's supposed to haunt. And they disappeared off the face of the earth.
The urban legend is basically that some hermit kidnapped children into a dilapidated cabin in the forest, and then murdered them in the basement in pairs, having one stand in the corner while they kill the other. You may recognize those iconic shots. And supposedly he was under the orders of the Blair Witch to do all this. There's some other stuff too, but that's the gist of what they're investigating. They then go into the woods with their equipment and their camera and stuff to camp, and then stuff starts to get a bit odd. They find these stone cairns and weird symbols and things throughout the woods, but then those same cairns are getting erected around their tent and their camp, and then their equipment goes missing. Voices and sounds start occurring and happening around them, and things start spiraling out of control.
We're going that way. That way.
We are in the middle of nowhere.
We've been in the middle of nowhere for 2 days. The car is parked in the middle of nowhere almost.
Look at this shit, man. This is nothing.
Okay, let's just keep going, all right?
It's another one of those movies that really exemplifies how frightening getting lost in the woods really can be. Again, this isn't like The Conjuring or Poltergeist. A house isn't going to erupt. Watch the 2016 one for that if you want that sort of shit. It's just a really good dive into a paranoia-driven experience in the woods. Unlike The Forest, which we'll get into that. Definitely watch this. It's not perfect. It's very interesting and good on its own, of course. But it's a historical watch too. I think if you really want to get into the horror genre, you kind of have to watch this movie at some point to understand some context about other found footage. Also, don't worry about the sequels. Except the Scooby-Doo Blair Witch Project thing, and no, I'm not joking that it's real and bizarre and also great and fantastic.
Velma Dinkley, and this is a documentary of one of our mysteries. That's Scooby-Doo, Fred Jones, and Daphne Blake.
Hey, how you doing?
Of course, I want to play myself in the movie version, and that's Norville Rogers.
It's Shaggy! Like nobody calls me Norval.
What's the matter, Norville?
That's not on tape, is it?
Something wrong, Norville.
Norville.
Very funny. Norval.
7.7 out of 10. Number 168 is The Blue Elephant 2, which is a sequel, so we're skipping that. So we're going to go straight into number 169, The Boy. Oh, what a waste of a set. This movie's up there as far as one of the dumbest modern horror movies that anyone's ever seen. You already know this, I don't gotta say shit. Quick plot synopsis, I guess. Girl has to take care of a boy for 2 old grand folks when they go on a vacation, except it's a porcelain doll, not an actual boy. There's some gremlin-style rules attached to taking care of it, and then the doll starts moving around like it's haunted, and the girl is affrighted. Spoilers from here.
What is that?
It's a man in the wall. Movie's really dumb. It's a piece of shit, but it's funny, I guess. 3 out of 10. I didn't dive too deep into this because that's kind of all there is to this movie. Go watch the Red Letter Media video on it if you want. Number 170 is The Bridge Curse. The first Taiwanese horror movie on this list, which means this video is now banned in China. This movie involves a group of teens investigating an urban legend for a project involving, as you might imagine, a bridge. This urban legend is like if you step on the stairs and you turn back, spooky basic black hair Asian horror lady drags you into the water. A journalist investigates some deaths that happen from this. There's some interconnected timeline shit going on because a new group of teens are now investigating the same urban legend as well. Movie's Movie, the atmosphere got okay towards the middle to end maybe. There's an obvious twist, but whatever. I mean, it's super forgettable, but I don't think you'll hate your time if you just put this on. 5 out of 10. Number 171 is Don't Think It, Don't Say It, it's the Bye Bye Man. This is another hilariously bad movie. This is also one of those situations where there's a bit too much to unpack and it's kind of already been done perfectly. I'm going to do something weird. I'm going to just repeat what I just said with the last review and recommend that you guys go watch Red Letter Media's review of it. They're half in the bag because they covered this movie and why it's so shit pretty much perfectly. I don't think it's the worst movie ever precisely because, I mean, look at this fucking list. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's shit. Quick summary, I guess. College kids go to a house. There's a spooky desk with a Don't Think It, Don't Say It, Bye Bye Man shit on there. The idea being this entity will make you go crazy with this infectious name, the Bye Bye Man. A problem that Red Letter Media covers in the review is that it's not a name like Bagul or Bajuju or Stinky Lumbaka or where it's a really uncommon name or phrase. No, you say Bye Bye Man all the time. Oh, fuck! I can't even do that joke because they already did. I tried rewatching it to give a comprehensive review, but it's so fucking bad. I actually couldn't even sit through it again. But the characters are all terrible. There's a weird scene that I also forgot about where the Bye Bye Man apparently makes a guy's boner goes away so he can't have hot fornication with this goth chick. Oh, and he has coin that he tosses in the hoodie and a meat dog, I guess. Why would I recommend this for you to watch this movie? Yeah, I guess I would. And then you can watch the Red Letter Media video or just the Red Letter Media video because this movie is ridiculously bad. Yeah, in fact, you can just watch all of Red Letter Media's videos. They're a very good channel, much better than what I'm doing right now. The movie's like 3.8 out of 10. It's bad. Shit, it's funny though. Number 172 is The Car. This movie knows exactly what it is, and it does exactly what it needs to. The Car is about some sort of haunted or demonic or evil, or we don't really know actually, car with no driver that has but one desire, which is to mow down anyone who's in reach, and the only one in the way is a sheriff and his posse of police force. Oh my god. This was actually a surprisingly fun movie, and it wasn't complete schlock like I thought it would be. The film quality is really pretty. It's nice and grainy and colorful. I know that grainy doesn't sound like a compliment, but in a way, it helps set the tone for this kind of stupid premise. Weirdly enough, the movie takes the threat seriously, and I think it actually works in this movie's favor. The characters are determined and likable, there's gratuitous car violence and nonsensical explosions. And actually tense moments. It's like a way less shitty version of Maximum Overdrive. I enjoyed it. Satisfying movie, satisfying explosions. It's a grand old fun time. 7 out of 10. Now, I wish I could say the same about number 173, The Car 2, Road to Revenge. This was such absolute fucking garbage, especially considering how much fun the first movie was. This takes place a few decades later in real time and 100 or so years later from the movie. Now it's all cyberpunk, but not really. What's fascinating is that this movie looks so much fucking worse than the first one, despite being so many years ahead in time, like in our time.
You're coming with me.
And also, instead of an ambiguous evil responsible for the phantom car, it's just a microchip that absorbed the consciousness of a douchebag corpo. This time it's also about a grizzled cop and a badass female person who takes no shit from nobody, who is the Corpo's ex. This world stinks. The gore stinks. The CG stinks. The whole movie fucking stinks. It sucks! 3.2 out of 10. Number 174 is The Conjuring. I am very surprised to see this back. I thought Netflix was cheaper than that, but then again, it's been so long that maybe it's cheap again.
Yeah, do you want to see them?
Yeah? How?
With this. When the music stops, you see them in the mirror standing behind you.
Okay.
But you have to twist the key.
Okay.
This is the start of James Wan's wildly successful Conjuring series and extended universe, although I should say that he doesn't do all the movies, just Conjuring 1 and 2, although he did produce the Annabelles and a lot of the other movies in this franchise. I don't really need to talk about this movie much either. The plot's pretty simple. It's about a family of 7, wow, by the way, mom, dad, and 5 daughters, and a dog, and we all know what's gonna happen to the dog. That moves into a house, and it happens to be haunted by an evil spirit. When things get too crazy, they call in the portrayals of real-life demonologists and likely rubes, maybe. I shouldn't say that. Oh, I didn't mean that. Real-life exorcists, they're real. Ed and Lorraine Warren to help solve the case. The scares and situations are neat. There are some jump scares, but I don't really recall them feeling cheap. They are set up pretty well, and in ways that are actually interesting. The characters are good too. You do root for them. It is exciting. Honestly, it's just a more familiar version of Insidious, like more familiar, like story treading, and it was also directed by James Wan. This is an example of one of those horror movies with mass theater appeal and is also just a good movie. You'll definitely enjoy it. Invite some friends or I guess stream it as a watch party and have a fun movie night. 7.8 out of 10. I don't think it's quite as good as Insidious because Insidious was more creative to me and personally had more of an interesting premise, but that's just like a personal thing. That doesn't mean execute this movie and only watch Insidious, of course. Number 175 is The Conjuring 2. Second verse, same as the first, but this time it's London flavored. I'm also going to keep this review kind of vague because, expect most of the same from the first movie. It's about as good, I think, maybe a little better for a few specific visuals that I really enjoyed. It's about a family in London who's haunted by what's essentially British Eustace bags. There's some media tension where the mom literally gets possessed on camera and starts throwing shit around, I mean in the movie by the way, and getting the attention of the Warrens. At the same time, Lorraine Warren, the medium of the two, keeps getting visions of her husband dying and getting impaled, and she's afraid to go on his next adventure because it might be his last. There's also some really weird things going on with the nun ghost thing, and there's a really, really cool scene involving some paintings in a room with the nun, and I liked it a whole lot. I also want to give attention to the, what we see now is the Crooked Man is in this movie. Apparently, some people really didn't like the scenes he was in because they thought it was too goofy, but that's part of why me and Logan liked it so much. It was so off-putting in the climax, and it really added to the overall freakiness, and hey, he's getting a spin-off, look at that! Eventually. As a minor criticism, it got too, this is gonna sound dumb, cinematic. At the climax, too many things were just blowing up and going crazy. It was like a Marvel movie for a minute there, but that's not that big of a deal for this kind of film. Anyways, movie's good. Do a watch party like before, have a grand old time. This isn't The Green Room or Puzzle or The Witch, but yeah, same score too, I guess, 7.8 out of 10. Number 176 is The Darkness, also known as The Shitty Babadook. This generic-ass titled movie is about an autistic kid who finds some rocks in the Grand Canyon that appear to have some sealed demonic Native American spirits, and now he's haunted / befriended by them, and they kind of make everything else shitty around him. Oh, I kind of forgot how bad this movie was. It's forgettably bad, kind of like Family Blood. There's some interesting plot elements in it, I guess, like the rocks, but there's also really bad CG, really dumb melodrama, and wasted bacon. 4.4 out of 10? It's not quite as ridiculously bad as Rotten Tomatoes says, but I mean, that's an aggregator, first of all, so it's not one person, but it's just not worth your time. Number 177 is The Day of the Lord. I was ready for a bargain bin exorcist demon possession movie, but this was actually pretty great. Some parts felt a bit silly, but I'll get to that later. This is about a retired priest whose last exorcism resulted in a boy getting killed, so now he sits in self-exile. A reformed drug addict and a friend calls him, explaining that his daughter needs help, that she's been possessed by the devil because she beheaded a cat or something. Anyways, she gets dumped at the priest's house while he determines what's going on. For all intents and purposes, she's a normal teenage asshole girl, and the priest doesn't really act like anything's amiss. Then, well, things take a left turn.
No va a parar. ¿Está caliente? El té. Sí está caliente.
And what I like about this movie is the way it adds to the genre rather than rehashing it and doing the same shit over and over again. I guess spoilers from here. The exorcism is immediately brutal and cruel, and there's even this funny scene.
Abandona el cuerpo de Raquel.
¡Que te la metan por el culo, pinche loco!
Creías que iba de farol. Ir de farol es mentir. Y mentir es pecado.
I will warn you that this movie does get a bit fucked up, especially towards the end, and not necessarily in gore or scares. You'll know what I mean if you watch it. Okay, yeah. So the girl. Okay, yeah. So again, spoilers. The girl was definitely possessed. She was just essentially hiding, because why flip tables and levitate if that would just draw attention? Anyway, she turns the tables on the priest and her father and has him bound to a chair. And at this point, she calls the police, begging them to come save her, wearing the facade of a normal girl again. So regardless of what happens, they're pretty much fucked. So like, this may have been a bit too far, but what's the most fucked up thing a demon-possessed daughter can do to her dad to make him feel awful? Did you guess blowing him and then raping him? Yeah. Anyways, it's one of those things where like, yeah, that would probably be the most fucked up thing to do, but you don't actually imagine that they do it on screen. But I guess you don't even imagine that at all, because you don't. Why would you? But yeah, movie was great. I would definitely recommend it. It's different and a fresher breath there for its genre, but yeah, it does get intense. 7.8 out of 10. Number 178 is The Devil and Father Amorth. Well, this doesn't actually count as a movie, but it's in the list.
At the time I made the film The Exorcist, I had never seen an exorcism. More than 4 decades later, I witnessed the one you were about to see.
This is a 1-hour documentary from the director of The Exorcist, Peter Blatty, and regarding his attempt to film a real exorcism, one being done by apparently one of the most famous exorcists, Father Amorth, if I'm saying that right. It's a bit dry, but I mean, it's a documentary. Surprisingly, the exorcism itself is the most dry and boring part. So dry that the editor put a really shitty audio filter on the lady while she was being exorcised. I don't know why. It would have been perfectly fine without it. It's really, really obvious. There's also this whole section towards the end where Blatty describes a situation where he didn't bring a camera into a church and some absolutely crazy shit happened, like running across the walls, throwing chairs across the room. But of course he didn't film it because he didn't bring his camera, right? Other than that, it was sort of interesting. If you're into, I don't know, this sort of topic, check it out. Rating inapplicable. Number 179, The Doll, and then 180, The Doll 2. I don't know why the fuck I finished both of these movies. I don't know what you want me to say. These movies really do feel like complete rip-offs, especially the first one. There are scene for scene rip-offs from the fucking Conjuring and Annabelle. Oh, okay, so for a bit of context, since it has been a minute, these movies do precede Sabrina, which I reviewed in the last video. It hardly changed anything though, because these movies are unoriginal to a fault, really. There's a few pieces of imagery that I do like in this movie. I like when the ghost girl shows up here as this little nightmares hooded thing. And of course, this is immediately followed up by a rip-off scene. I don't really want to give these movies too much attention because of the complete unoriginality. Like, I understand doing homages to popular flicks and then the inspiration material, but that doesn't mean you can just redo it but make it worse. They also copy the "come find me" hide and seek scene thing with like written on paper, and keep in mind it's literally within the first 10 minutes of The Doll 1, so I was already annoyed. But it doesn't just stop there. They rip off the Annabelle interview scene with the Warrens, and then later on they rip off the scene where the Warrens' daughter ends up in a spooky haunted museum area, and they tell her that they shouldn't be in there.
Minggu lalu, kami bertiga habis pergi dari luar kota untuk antar mama dan papa. Karena mereka ada kerjaan selama seminggu.
But never once did we find any sign or evidence of intrusion. And this all...
Shira, kan ibu udah pernah bilang jangan main kesini. Shira ke atas ya, main sama Bisumi.
Iya, Bu.
Honey, what are you doing? Come here. You know better, all right? Georgiana? Come on, did you touch anything?
No.
Now you might be wondering why I'm bothering to point out these seemingly minor and mundane scene grifts, but that itself is why I'm pointing it out. They're not just repackaging scares or setups, it's entire fucking plot points and then the structure of a far more successful film series. I don't even like the Conjuring series that much. I think they're good. I think they're fine as far as horror entertainment goes, but they don't mean much to me. They're not groundbreaking, but well constructed and entertaining. Anyways, the Doll 1 and 2 are not well constructed or entertaining. Maybe second one. I suppose I should tell you what the original plot there was, but for all I know, even the original plot was ripped off of something else. Possessed doll, lives in tree. Poor couple, man is contractor. Man cuts down tree. Doll is angry and haunts couple. They call bootleg warns, and spoiler, not even gonna do the fucking card. It turns out that the contractor husband was really poor, back when he was really poor. He did one of the worst B&D attempts with his friend that I've ever seen. That's right, folks, another one of the horror Indonesian secret bad guy twist things. I know this appears to now be a staple among these Indonesian horror movies, but it's bad, so I'm gonna make fun of it, because now I expect it in every single movie. Let me briefly get into the robbery and also why it's so badly written. So they start the robbery. He says no one's supposed to be home, yet the entire family's there, so wouldn't there be cars in the driveway? Isn't there another way to check if people are at the fucking mansion that they're trying to rob? I get that these aren't master thieves, but isn't this common sense? And then, of course, they break a plate for no reason, so the dad comes out to investigate. They hold the dad hostage to nab money from the safe, and then the wife proceeds to get the entire family killed. Well, actually, the dad does, really. They're all fucked up. The wife saw the robbers trying to get the safe open, and then she fucking sprints for about 10 feet and slamming her wet-ass feet against the ground to grab her daughter and hide her, while screaming and making as much noise as humanly possible to alert the robbers. Hey, there's people trying to rob us at gunpoint, but they don't know we're here. Hide here so they can't find us, and they won't hear us and find us and kill us. And of course, one of the robbers hears her fucking screaming and running and holds them hostage too. The safe gets open, and then the dad makes the dumbest fucking decision he possibly could. He grabs a nearby fruit knife and stabs one of the robbers, who's holding a fucking shotgun, mind you, pointed at his wife and daughter, stabs him, and then, surprise, surprise, blasts him back in the back, and then blasts the wife and child. Well, I say wife and child, really just a wife gets hit, but I guess they have a shared health bar or something, and everyone but our main character dies. Oh, and the little girl had the doll with her, so that's her, I guess. Oh, any other technical criticism I could make, like CG and shitty soundtrack, is just repeating the same shit from Sabrina, so I'm not even gonna bother. Yeah, 3 out of 10. Very bad. Oh yeah, The Doll 2. I actually remember the least about this, but I think that has more to do with the fact that all these movies are just blending together, the movies in this series. I do think this movie did end up being slightly more original than the first one, maybe. Again, nothing super taken from a different property. This is practically all spoilers, but who cares, it's still shite. Anyways, quick surprise, the daughter of the bootleg Warrens, to my shock, actually gets fucking murdered in the first 20 minutes by a demon, so that's a start. And then a different family's kid dies in a car accident where a bus, who had plenty of time to stop, but whatever, slams into their car. Oh, and their car, had to break a couple cables cut, that's gonna be relevant later. By the way, the kid's also holding the Dane DeVito doll that we're used to seeing in the Sabrina movie, albeit it's less dirty. So now it's just dad, mom, and maid lady character who totally isn't going to be important later. By the way, I said slightly more original. There's still rip-off elements, like the doll now being haunted and the mother believing that their daughter is possessing it, like in, I think, Annabelle does this. This is honestly generic enough to not be a rip-off, but I don't trust the series for it to not be. The scene where they're divining what the ghost is trying to tell them is kind of neat. They do some weird esoteric ritual stuff, which wasn't too hokey, and I thought it was kind of cool. Basically, the little girl ghost had been giving them clues throughout the movie about why she's haunting them, and it first starts off with some riddles or clues leading to her treasure in her room, which was basically her camera that she would always carry around, right before she died at least. And then the wife, learning this, counts the SD cards and notices one is missing. And then through the last dividing they did, they find where the last SD card had ended up, which was kind of hinted at earlier when she was being invited into the basement by the ghost. And then the SD card, of course, shows that Yanni, the not-so-important maid lady, had paid some mechanic to fucking cut their brake cables, which resulted in a child-slaying accident. So I do like this idea a lot. It's not super original, but it's a solid thing. Mystery Ghost provides something that has to be solved, and it's not crazy, but it's a backbone that you can work with. Now, if it could have been written better or been built on more for the entire movie, that would have maybe pushed us out of complete shit to mediocre. Anyways, plot twist. Husband fucked a maid because when wife had gotten sad about being mostly infertile, she had pretty much ignored him and made him feel neglected, I guess. Anyways, a wife gets all preggy finally, then the husband goes back to wifey. then tries to get rid, and I don't mean fire. I don't mean getting killed. I mean, he tries to, like, just, you know, fire the maid that he fucked, but she stays. Eventually, she gets jealous of the couple being happy, and she tries to murder the entire family by cutting the brake cables. From there, the movie actually does get mildly exciting. The maid breaks free from the rope and proceeds to try to finish the job, and you get an actually kind of stressful and anxious chase scene where everyone gets their fucking shit kicked in and smashed. There's a really goofy practical effect eye gouge, and then the girl possesses the mom to help her turn the tables and psychotically chase down and brutally maim and assault the maid. They then try to stop their daughter Ghost from killing Yanni because they don't want her to be a murderer, although at this point, honey, I don't think it really matters. She's been stabbed and bludgeoned like 50 times in this fucking vent. Anyways, to wrap it up, I think this is probably the best of the worst as far as this series itself is concerned. I wouldn't recommend you sit through this entire movie, just watch the last 30 minutes maybe, with the context I gave you because it is so ridiculous. It is very intense and violent, not like the fucking Green Room, but yeah. This one I think is like a 4.5 out of 10 just because I was legitimately entertained by that last portion, which is where you'd want the best stuff to be anyways. Number 181 is The Figurine, or Araromire, or Mire. I feel kind of bad about how I treated this movie. It's a pretty low-budget African movie, and I was interested because, you know, it's good to experience different cultures and what movies they produce, but it's just really boring and basic. The idea is that there's these three friends, and there's sort of a love triangle with the nerdy dude and the lady who has the douchey but still nice boyfriend, the third person of the group. And the movie centers around them finding a figurine during their mandatory military service. This figurine we learn about through the opening, where for 7 years, good shit happens, and then at the end of those 7 years, you pay a price for 7 years. Then that happens. I got really bored and disinterested. The actors did an okay job, but the characters were just not interesting to watch. Low production quality did not help either.
Alpha. Oh, so pé bí báyìí náà gbé wá ni. Alpha kí ló ń ṣẹlẹ̀?
I ended up skipping it about 3/4 of the way through, but I did read the plot summary a while afterward to see the movie where the movie was heading, because I didn't really think it'd be interesting. Turns out though that a few things do happen that I did not see coming. So to be fair, if you can deal with the weird production value, and which I normally can, and you want to see a sort of interesting script, check it out. It is 124 minutes though, so like 2 hours. So yeah, very long. I do maintain that if I lose my interest for a solid hour and a half, like, I think it's fair to skip it or say that it's not good. On that, I'll give it 4.5 as well. It's because you had plenty of time for it to be interesting, man. Number 182 is The Forest, and oh boy, I'm glad that I can shit on this movie today. I saw this movie a long ass time ago, and I knew then and there that it was awful, but I forgot absolutely everything, so I had to watch it again. If you don't remember the horribly obnoxious ad campaign for this movie, Aokigahara is the suicide forest at the foot of Mount Fuji, where people go to kill themselves, of course. You may remember the shit stain that was Logan Paul and his crew who filmed the dead body there. Natalie Dormer plays a twinlet whose twin disappeared mysteriously and ended up in the forest, and now she's trying to get that twin back with the help of a guide. The worst thing about this movie is probably the script. It seemed that it was relying really hard on Natalie Dormer to carry it, and well, she didn't, because she was directed pretty terribly. I'm pretty indifferent towards edgy and shocking themes or subject matter, by the way, but I do think it's an incredibly poor taste to make a film about a real-life forest where people in real life go and commit suicide, something that still happens to this day. They still go out there and, you know, fucking kill themselves. But I can excuse it if the movie is good enough, which is obviously not the case here. The themes are completely mixed up too. There's a constant sensation of like paranoia that Natalie Dormer's character is going through with the guide, through hallucinations or actual ghosts or whatever, and she's slowly convinced that the guide is out to kill her through getting her lost. Why the hell is suicide forced using mistrust and treachery as its main method of leading the characters astray? I don't really understand this choice. Natalie Dormer's character is also incredibly frustrating as she constantly makes idiotic decision after idiotic decision.
Right, I understand. You go.
You cannot stay. At night, in the Jukai, people see bad things. Sometimes do bad things. Very bad things. The forest draws out your fear. Your sadness.
Don't tell me you believe in Yuri, Nishi. You sound like the girl from the visitor center.
The movie also ends on a terrible CGI snap zoom that's like sci-fi original tier shit, and that's pretty bad. Spoiler, because it's the ending shot. That's all I'm going to say about this movie. Complete dog shit. I'm completely upset because I love forest settings for horror movies and games because, especially if you live in the South or camped or been anywhere wooded, you know how freaky a forest can be at night. There's plenty of good movies about the woods. Blair Witch. It's natural production value and they still fucked it up. This movie just sucked so hard. 2.7 out of 10. If you want to watch a movie about being scared in the woods, go watch Blair Witch. It's on this list now. Fuck this movie. Okay, that's going to do it this time. This is actually not all of the teas. When I recorded all the audio, it was about an hour and a half of just raw me talking. That's not including me adding footage or spacing things out, which would have made it probably about an hour 45-ish to 2. It would have been really long. So I went ahead and decided to just split this down the middle, and you'll see the next episode soonish. Again, the audio is already there. I already have most of the stuff I need. I just need more clips. But yeah, I just gotta edit it and put it together, and expect that soonish. Anyways, yeah, thanks. Like, subscribe, share, do all that shit, please. It does help a lot. And that'll be it. Bye bye.